Hi guys, welcome to our book club. Today will be the fourth session of our experts level. Currently we are reading The Turn of the Screw, a book written by Harry James. And this video will cover chapters 16, 17, 18, 19 and 20. So let's just start. As I told you the introduction of this video, today we will cover from chapter 16 to chapter 20, but before that let's just remember what happened a little bit in previous chapters. So remember that we have a conversation between Miles and the governess in the churchyard, a conversation about why Miles cannot go back to school, that there is something unnatural happening in the house that nobody is talking about, that why like they cannot bring their uncle in order to help them. And also throughout the story we know some details about Peter Quinn, about Miss Jessel. We have some encounters, some scary encounters. And well, the last part of chapter 15 finishes just with the governess coming back to school. And as soon as she is coming back, she saw that there was someone in her desk, and well, that someone was Miss Jessel. So as you may see, I am already sharing my screen, and you can see here that it says, seated at my own table in clear noonday light, I saw a person. And she was thinking that probably it was someone writing a love letter for, like her lover. But there was, like not a mate. It was her. And they just look at each other for a moment. And in that moment, it's like, well, you and me, we have the same right because this is our desk. But also, she kind of felt that Miss Jessel was in pain. So you can see here that she was, like Miss Jessel was in a black dress, and she was just quiet. So the governess just yelled at Miss Jessel like, "Hey, you terrible woman, miserable woman!" And in that moment, she disappeared. It says there was nothing in the room the next minute but the sunshine and a sense that I must stay. And that's it for chapter 15. So we start with chapter 16. So as I told you, the chapter begins with or continues with the governess. That is, she came back from the churchyard. She didn't enter to the mass because her conversation with Miles was a little bit like not exhausting but unexpected, and she was in shock, so she didn't know what to do. And she preferred just, like to go for a walk, to come back home early, and she saw Miss Jessel. So the chapter here continues with the governess thinking that when the two little boys come back, they will say like, "Hey, what happened with you? Like, you disappear." And when they come back, they didn't say anything. Like, hey, like, how was everything? Nice. Okay, well, like, I will go to sleep. And that's it. So the governess saw that Mrs. Gross, because remember that in the, like they went to the church together, Mrs. Gross was like, yeah, like, yes, yeah. But in her face, the governess saw that, like, okay, something happened. Or maybe not something. She couldn't read her completely, but she was so serious that the governess is like, okay, something, like may happen here. And well, you can see here that the only reason, it was, we must do nothing but what she likes. So don't disobey, don't do anything. If she wanted to go, that's it, And well, let's see. Oh yeah, because like as I commented to you, she was expecting this, but then she could she talked with Mrs. Gross, and Mrs. Gross was like, "Hey, what happened? I mean, you left." And well, the kids told me not to comment anything, so I was just like, okay, let's just do it. Because Miles says like, hey, let's just do whatever like the governess wants, don't say anything. And Flora was like, okay, is this a game? Okay, I will do it. And Mrs. Gross was like, let's do it. So they are talking about that, and Mrs. Rose was like, well, where were you? And the governess answered like, I had to visit a friend, like I saw Miss Jessel. And the Mrs. Rose is like, hey, Miss Jessel, like really? Why? And she said like, oh well, but like I understand everything. I like it says here. Oh yeah, because they said like we have a talk. Like a talk? You can talk with them? Like no, but you could read the signs. And it says here, like she wants Flora. Um because yeah, the governess is sure that Miss Jessel wants Flora. And she's like, well, but I will help them. I will help her. So I am sending a letter to their uncle, and I will just bring him here because he needs to help them. He needs to know what is happening. And well, the governess, Mrs. Ross is like, oh yes, yeah, please do it. Like this. You can see here like. I will. I told you with Miles. Oh yes, because like before the letter, or like a little bit later, the governess is telling Mrs. Groves like, hey, but with Flora this happening, and they told me not to say anything, and I saw Miss Jessel, but I had a talk with Miles, and I think with Miles there's something super weird. I don't know, like if we have a good relationship now or not, because like he asked me about school. I didn't know what to say, because remember that the governess, the only thing she knows is that he was rejected. He was rejected from school, and that's it. So they are talking about a letter from like the old place, and the old place, it will be the school, and the school says like he was rejected. And it says, I cannot undertake to work the question on behalf of a child who was being expelled. So it's like, I don't know what happened here. So in order to give him a solution, an answer, we need to tell him. We need to bring his uncle in order to tell him. So that's it. That is what happened in chapter 16. And we finished just, like with the letter I told you. That she will says like, oh yes, we need to write a letter. Oh, and something happened here. Like Miss Grosses says like, oh yes, I can help you with that. I can write the letter. And the governess says something like, do you know how to write? Because remember that she doesn't know how to read either. So the governess, Mrs. Gross is like, no, but I can ask, like this person to do it. And the governess says something like, do we want that someone else knows us our story? Do you think that he or she will believe us? And Mrs. Gross is like, sorry, you're right. You're right. And the governor says like, yes, I will do it. And that is it. That is it for chapter 16. So in chapter 17, we have here that, let's see. Yeah, we have a little, like an encounter, a very weird encounter, because it says that here it was at night, and then after the experience with Miles going out at midnight, well, she is like a little bit anxious, so she is verifying that he is at his bed, and he says, like, hey, why are not, oh yeah, because she's like peering, and Miles is like, hey, come on, come in, like, I know you are there. And he's like, hey, why are you not sleeping? And the guy says like, well, I'm just here. I'm just laying with my eyes open. I'm thinking, but that's it. And let's see. But remember that the way Miles is talking is not really for a boy. It says, you are like a troop of cavalry. That fancy noise. I don't think that is the way a little kid is talking. And well, in this part it says like, hey, you are not happy, like, I know you want to go, I will bring your uncle, like, just wait a little bit. And the governess is saying something like that, but Miles is behaving weird. He's behaving like if they were flirting. Well, not her, but him. And here you can see that, like the way he's speaking, and also it's not like flirting, but the way he expresses, and also the topic they are talking about is not really clear. They are talking about something they know, like, hey, probably it is about the appearances, probably it is about school, probably it is also, oh yes, um it is quite clear, but it is not really clear. Remember that the reason why the governess thinks Miles was rejected from school, it was because of probably he has a trauma, like he cannot be around other people, because probably he was raped by Peter Quinn, because probably something happened there, and she wants to know. So in this moment they are talking, like Miles is very, 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 very gentleman, and the governess is like, well, if you really want to talk about something that happened in your previous school, something, like about what happened in your school, something, I am here for you. And also the little kid is like, well, nothing, like, I don't want to go back to the same school, I want another one, but I'm okay, like, I think you better go. And the governess, she thinks that she lost the moment, because probably he closed himself, he doesn't want to talk about that. And well, the governess, before leaving, like in this, they are talking, like, my uncle must come, as I told you, like they are talking like, hey, I will bring your uncle. And it's like, oh yes, because he needs to come. They are talking, and then is what I told you. Well, like here, the things you never told me, like he can send you back. Let's just, like, read a little bit before. So it says, let's just read all this part. So it says, the exultation with which we author this helped me somehow for the instant to meet him rather more. And how much will Miles have to tell him? There are all things he will ask you, because he's like, you need to bring your uncle and he will ask you questions. He turned it over, very likely, but what things? The things you never told me. To make up his mind what to do with you, he can send you back. Oh, I don't want to go back. I want a new feel. So it's like, well, like if something happened, you can tell me, like I'm here. But nothing happened. So he said it with admirable serenity, with positive, impeccable gaiety. And doubtless it was that very note that most evoked for the poignancy the unnatural childish tragedy of his probable reappearance at the end of 3 months with all this bravado and still more dishonor. It overwhelmed me now that I should never be able to be that, yeah, to bear that, and it made me let myself go. I threw myself upon him, and in the tenderness of my pity, I embraced him. Dear little mice. So, like she hugged him, and it is like, oh, yes, what happened, old lady? And it's like, if something happened, like, I'm here for you, you can tell me, you can. And he's like, oh, you better go, you know? To let me alone, he replied. And the governess is like, I lost my chance. But like she is like, oh, poor little baby, oh, like, oh. And before she, like they are hugging, and then suddenly it was dark. And the governor is like, what happened? And Miles says, oh, the candle's out. I cried. I then cried. So sorry. It was I who blew it, dear, said Miles. So, as I told you, he was kind of with this flirting tone of voice, I guess. I feel it. And also they were talking about sensible topics, but he didn't open completely. And the governess still feels that there is something there, but well, she lost her chance. He closed himself. He doesn't want to talk with her. So that is what happened in chapter 17. And in chapter 18, we have that the governess was thinking about the letter, and she wrote a letter. So she is about to send the letter, but still, like, okay, I will, like take it to the box letter, but for the moment, I keep it here with me in my pocket. And they are let me see. Yes, like I remember that the governess and Miles, they have this moment, and then like he was behaving like nothing happened, and in a moment he was like, hey, can you come with me? I want to do something for you. So they just go to a room with a piano, and he starts playing. Miles is playing the piano. Let me see, where is that? David playing to soul could never have shown a fine set. It was literally a charming exhibition. Well, we have, like Little Gentleman. We have that after our early dinner, he came round to me and asked if I shouldn't like him for a half an hour to play to me. David playing to soul could never have shown a finer sense of the occasion in this part. So, it's like, hey, can you just give me some minutes? I want to play with you. I want to play for you. And she's like, oh, okay. So he was very gentleman. Remember that Miles has this way of talking. And it says he sat down at the old piano and played as he had never played. So they were in another room. Miles was playing the piano, and the governess was so embellished. She was really into that she forgot everything. And suddenly she realized that she doesn't know where is Flora. So she is, like asking for Flora. Hey, where is Flora? And it's like, oh, probably is with Mrs. Rose. But in that moment, she knew that Miles was a distraction. So she was looking for Flora. She wasn't with Mrs. Rose, and they are looking everywhere, everywhere. And there is a moment where Mrs. Rose is like, I mean, I cannot find her. Like, where is her? Where is Miles? And the governor says, like, Miles is with Peter Queen, and we need to find Flora. What? Like, yes, like later I will explain you. That doesn't matter for the moment, but Flora, you can see here. Oh, he's with Queen. They are in the schoolroom. Like, oh yeah, like, yes, they play a trick on me. So I was distracted and I lost Flora. So, well, they are like, okay, let's just look for Flora. And Mrs. Gross is like, but what happened with Miles? And so like, fine, you can go with Miles, and I just will look Flora. And the Mrs. Gross is like, no way, I am not going back with Peter Quink and Miles, knowing that there is a ghost, there's something there. So like the chapter finished there. They are looking for Flora, and as I was telling you in chapter 19, it says, we went straight to take the lake, as it was called at Bly. It was just, like the lake, no name, not a special name. And, they are, well, the governess is feeling these kind of gut feelings. So she knows that, she's going toward that way. And little by little, like while they are walking, Mrs. Rose is like, are you sure you're going, like toward water? Like, how? And the governess comments Mrs. Rose like, but do you remember the first encounter we had with Miss Jessel? Like, it was around this area. It was, like in that place. So I know that, Flora wanted to go back by herself. So let's just go there. And when they arrive to the bank, like to the edge of the land, and then the water restart, they are looking for a boat, because the governess is like, yes, she crossed, like the water, she crossed the lake. How? And because Mrs. Gross is like, she's a little girl, like, come on, she cannot move a boat, she doesn't know how. And the governess answered like, yeah, but sometimes she's not. She doesn't behave like a little girl, she behaves like an old woman. So like we kept thinking like, possession, like interesting. And well, like instead of crossing the river, they are just, like walking around, and they found the boat, that it was, like hidden among some grass, among, like some herbs that they were around there. And it was well tied, perfect. So Mrs. Groves is like, well, that, like was the job of our little girl. So interesting. And finally, like the governess was right, because they found her. It says, there she is. We both exclaim at once. So they found her. And let's just read this little, like part. It says, Flora, a short way off, stood before us on the grass and smiled, as if her performance was now complete. The next thing she did, however, was to stoop straight down and pluck, quite as if it were all she was there for, a big ugly spray of wither fern. So, like they found her, they saw her, and then she vomited. And as soon as she vomited, like Mrs. Rose was like, ah, she's there, this, and she ran and she hugged her. Like she hugged her, and as soon as she hugged her, like the governess was like, I know she wasn't Flora, I know she wasn't behaving as Flora, but she arrived, she saw her, and she was Flora, like as always. And Flora says this: I'll be hanged if I said, I'm sorry, I'll be hanged if I'll speak. And well, it's like, okay. And Flora asks the governess, like, hey, where are your things? And the governess answer Flora, like, where are yours? And Flora says, like, well, yeah, you're right. But where is Miles? And this was the perfect chance for the governess to ask her about Miss Jessel. So it says, like, okay, I will tell you where is Miles, but if you tell me where is Miss Jessel. And that is the end of chapter 19. So it is getting good. It is getting good, guys. So let's just finish with chapter number 20. And in chapter number 20, we have, like the scene that they are hugging, that, like the governess asked Flora about Miss Jessel. And then here we have that suddenly Miss Jessel was in front of them. Like she was there. And in this part, the governess is describing that, well, the figure was there, they were just staring at them, and that the little Flora was behaving weird, like she was shaking, she was, like being in front of this thing, like being in front of Miss Jessel, changed the behavior of our Flora, and that reaction causes something, like inside of the governess, like she wants to defend, she wants, like to fight back. And well, they are there, and suddenly, like everything disappear. That's it, like let's just read so we will see. The revelation then of the manner in which Flora was affected startled me. In truth, far more than I would have done to find her also merely agitated, for direct dismay was of course not what I had expected. Oh, because like when it appeared, Mrs. Groves is super scared, like, oh, like a ghost, like like she's there, and the governess is like, yes, I was right, like I knew it, I knew I wasn't crazy, and it says that, well, like the reaction of Flora affected more than the situation per se. So we have like Mm, let's see, where does it say? It says I could only grasp her more quickly yet, for even while she spoke, the hideous plain presence stood undimmed and untaunted. I had already lasted a minute, and it lasted while I continued seizing my colleague, quite thrusting her and it presenting her to it inside of my pointing gun. Oh yeah, because like, well, it is not like suddenly it disappeared, but they are hugging, they saw it, they are like in shock, and then Mrs. Gross, it is like a little bit frozen. So the governess is like, hey, hey, move, move, move. And it says like they just move. And when they just, like saw again, there was nothing. So we have here that as soon as they arrive to the house, they change Flora, they take care of her. And then, like, the governess, when she was a little bit like after the storm, like when she was reflecting, when she was in calm, when she was, like when she had 5 minutes, a 5 minutes break, she was just sitting like next to a fire. She was doing something. And that Miles arrived. Like he entered to the room and he just sat down next to her. But he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything about like stabbing the governor's back, like because he was lying, because he was the master head of like the plan. He was the plan master, the brain plan master. Like 1 second, it is, well, he was the brain of the plan. And well, nobody say anything, but but it says here, oh well, like he's whatever it was like, go, go. So they arrive. It says, no evening I had passed at live portents, Florida rupture, her little begun. Oh, like they remove their clothes. So when later, by the schoolroom fire, I was served by the tea by the usual maid, I indulged on the article of my other pupil in no inquiry whatever. He was freedom now. He may have it now. He may have it to the end. Well, he did have it, and it consisted, in part at least, of his coming in and at about 8 o'clock and sitting down with me in silence. So like after all this, the governess was like, well, like if he wants to go, he can do whatever he wants. Like like I cannot do anything. And as I commented to you, like she is in that room close to the fire, and then Miles arrives. He sat down and he didn't say anything. But the governess says, like, even if he didn't say anything, I knew he wanted to be with me. Like, he wanted to be, like next to me in my presence. So the chapter just finished like that. It says, we sat there in absolute stillness, yet he wanted, I felt, to be with me. So we know that they are talking, or probably the governess is talking a little bit of possessions. So probably that's why Miles is talking in this very, very weird, uncommon way, unnatural way for a little kid. I mean, he is 10 years old. And that is also why in the previous experiences with, like the curtain, where, like remember that Flora was hiding behind the curtains, or, like some of the answers they were giving, probably it was because they weren't kids. They were old people. So let's just see how the story finished, guys. This is almost the ending. Next video will be the last one for this book, so I'm very excited about to know how the book ends. And for the meanwhile, guys, see you in our session and continue having an excellent reading. See you, guys.